Hey there, welcome back. So here we are continuing our inductive reasoning portion. When we're done with inductive reasoning, we will move on to deductive reasoning. But in the meantime, let's just summarize a bit. What we have there on the left are words we learned from our last video. So on the top left, we have restrictive words. Those are words that limit the scope of whatever is being said. So if someone says something like most NBA players are tall, which in fact they are not saying that all NBA players are tall. They just said most. A few, in fact, are short. So then beneath that, what we have are absolute/extreme words. Those words are certainty words. They are words that often appear as the question portion of your logical reasoning questions. So, for example, let's see if I can find it in a book. Here you go. Look at number 12. Look at number 12 right there. It says that Crystal will not play soccer if Anita does. And that Anita will play soccer if Jerry is not late to school. And then look at how it ends. It says, based only on the information above, which of the following must be true? And must is in bold letters. Must is an absolute or extreme word. Now, they're not looking for a possibility. If they were looking for a possibility, they would use a restrictive word in that last question part of the question, right? But they don't. In bold is not a restrictive word. In bold is the word must. So they're looking for an absolute. What is true? What is absolutely true? Not sometimes true, possibly true, theoretically true. No. Almost all your questions will end with some word in bold. And as far as I've seen, it's always an extreme or absolute word. So you have to be careful, as I warned you in the last video, not to ever go from a restriction to an absolute. Somewhere in the premises that they give you, there might be a way to draw out an absolute, but be careful in how you do it. We'll do some examples, right? But just to sum up what we were talking about last video, here's what we were doing. We'd said two premises, and here they are, that most people in the park are kids in the morning. And the second one was that the park is dirty in the morning. Right? Nice. So we said, what kind of a conclusion can you make? Well, you can conclude that kids are dirty, right? Because they're the ones dirtying the park. You can say that. But can you? Look, I said are. Are is part of our absolute words. And look, this here, the park is dirty. That's also absolute. So far, so good. But of course, we run into a problem. And it's this. It's the word most. When you combine sentences, you have to be careful. Because some of them might contain absolutes, like this one does. But some of them might not. This one here does not contain an absolute. It has a restrictive word in it. That restrictive word lets you know that not all the people in the park are kids. Some of them are adults. And so, if the park's dirty, it might be because the adults are dirtying them. Of course, it can be because the kids are dirtying it too. Or it could be the case that the park was already dirty. Perhaps a dump truck, like a dump truck flipped over and all the garbage fell out of it, right? Anything could have happened. But when you do the SHSAT, it's a little different than when you think about these things philosophically. And I'll tell you why, because the SHSAT is not pure inductive reasoning. It's a bit more, in fact it is, deductive reasoning. And that's what we have to shift on over into, alright? So, whenever the SHSAT gives you sentences, you have to treat them as if they're true. Because, for all intents and purposes, they are true. Here, when we're just thinking, and it's just us, and we think about a sentence like most people in the park are kids in the morning, and then there's another one right after it, another premise, and it says the park is dirty in the morning, kids are dirty. Well, we think about it, well, is that something that's fine to say? It's not fine to say that, right? Because the kids might not be dirty. The kids might not be the ones making the park dirty. It might be the adults, the park might have already been dirty, but when you deal with the SHSAT, it's different. You have to take everything that they say as if it were true in the way that they say it. So if they say, all boys are dumb, all boys are dumb. Do not try to say, hey, but that's not true. So let me look. You're not allowed to put in information that comes from your own head in the SHSAT. All the information has to come from here. Okay? There are parts of the SHSAT that require your involvement, such as portions of the reading comprehension where you have to speculate. But remember, you're not making wild guesses then either. You're making speculations that are supported and based on the literature that you read in the passage. Okay? You're never just making a wild guess, ever, on the SHSAT. But here, in the part of logical reasoning that I've decided to call inductive/deductive reasoning, very little of you is required in terms of contributing material. The material itself does everything. It speaks for itself. Read the sentences closely, and again, I'll give you an example of what a real SHSAT question looks like, and you have to assume that all the premises, all the sentences inside the question are absolutely true, even if you know they're not true. All right, I know there's gravity here, but if a sentence says there's no gravity on Earth, then there's no gravity on Earth. You just must follow the sentence. All right, they're just making sure that you know how to read, that you understand what you're reading, and then once you understand what you're reading, that when you combine two different sentences together, you know how to draw the proper conclusions. Okay? So, let's move on. I guess before we do, here's this for inductive reasoning. You might like that. It's taken from Wikipedia. One more time, let's see it. It says, inductive reasoning. Reasoning in which the premises seek to supply evidence for the truth of the conclusion. While the conclusion of a deductive argument is certain, the truth of the conclusion of an inductive argument is probable. It's only probable. So for example, what could we have said that made sense about that situation that we said before, the one about kids in the park? Well, could we say this? Kids might be making the park dirty? Can we say that? How about kids are possibly making the park dirty? Are we allowed to say that? About what? About the statement that was just written down before. Alright, the one that I just erased. I know you have it in mind because not only did I write it now, if you watched the video before this one, it was also the same thing. It was about you walking past the park and noticing that the park in the morning was full of kids. Not completely, but that the people there were mostly kids. And that it was also dirty in the morning. And what we were saying is it okay for you to conclude that it's the kids that are making the park dirty, right? I said it wouldn't be. That if you said the kids are making the park dirty, that wouldn't be the necessary conclusion to reach. Necessary is a good word, actually. That wouldn't be the necessary conclusion to reach because the park's not full of just kids. The park also contained adults, right? Plus, we don't know how the mess got there. And so, it's a fact that it is not necessarily true that the kids are making the park dirty. Therefore, the statement, the kids are making the park dirty, cannot be true about those two premises. You cannot conclude that from those premises. You cannot. But can you conclude these things? That kids might be making the park dirty? Yes, you can. Because nothing in the premises contradicts this. Nothing in the premise contradicts the fact that kids might be making the park dirty. So this is something that you're allowed to logically say. And then here beneath this we have another one. It says that kids are possibly making the park dirty. You can also conclude that. You can conclude these two things because nothing in the premises that were written down before contradict them. Okay, so you could conclude something with probability with something that starts with a restrictive word. Alright? Can you conclude something with certainty from premises that start with restrictive words? No. But you could conclude something with probability or possibility. Or possibility. Here we're talking about, by the way, possibility because we have no way to determine the probability. You'd have to be around again. So we can't say that kids are probably making the park dirty. That wouldn't be true because how would we know? How would we know how to ascertain the probability? It's not like heads or tails where you know there's just heads and tails, so it's 1 out of 2. We don't know, so we can't say probably, but we can say possibly. Kids might be making the park dirty. Kids are possibly making the park dirty. Can we write kids can be making the park dirty? Yes, that one's good too. Kids can be making. Alright, we'll just go like that so we don't write the whole thing, because I don't think you have full view. Alright? Now, why are we allowed to make these statements? It's because of the word can, because of the word possibly, and because of the word might. Okay? So, these words here do not denote certainty. They denote probability. So let's put them here on the side and add them to our list. Alright? So, let's see. Probability words. Okay, we'll do that. What are our probability words? Possibly. Let's call them probability, possibility. Even though really, no. Let's be very strict with this. Those are just possibility words. Okay? There's a such thing as a probability words, but these really wouldn't be them. So possibility words are possibly, can, and might. Alright? So let's read that definition again. For inductive reasoning that's posted there, this comes from Wikipedia. It says that inductive reasoning is reasoning in which the premises seek to supply evidence for the truth of the conclusion. While the conclusion of a deductive argument is certain, those are the certain words, the truth of the conclusion of an inductive argument is probable. Alright? If something is possible, by the way, I mean, it has to have some kind of probability, right? So here we have it. These are the three conclusions that we are safe to draw. These are the only three conclusions we are safe to draw from what we had read before. We cannot blame the kids. We can only say that the kids might possibly be making the park dirty, that they can be making the park dirty, but we can't say they are definitely the ones making the park dirty. We can't. Alright? We'll have more practice, don't worry, alright? And this is going to get closer to the SHSAT material, you'll see, alright? So, that's that, and here's another definition for inductive reasoning. What does it say? It says, inductive reasoning is reasoning that derives general principles from specific observations. And this one's a bit more like the example that I gave you before with the kids in the park, right? Because it was based on observations that time, right? We said you were on your way to work, or was it to visit your grandma, whatever, and while you're walking past the park, you noticed that there were kids in it. You noticed that the kids were there in the morning. You noticed that the majority of people were kids. You noticed that the park was dirty. And therefore, you concluded wrongly that the kids made the park dirty. When in fact, the only kind of conclusion you could have made logically that was correct were these three. Alright? So again, what did you do? You started from specific observations and you made your way up to what? To a general principle. Alright? What do we call this again? Bottom up. Alright? This is bottom up reasoning. You start with the small things, with the details, with the observations, with the samples, and then from those things you work your way up to a general principle, to a conclusion. Alright? So, let's move on now to, finally, I like these, by the way, a lot, right? Make sure you write them down. They're important, and these have to do with what we were talking about before. Alright, so let's move on to deductive reason. Wow. See? Look at me. Gotta study too. Alright, deductive reasoning. Alright? That's what we're moving on to now. So, what's deductive reasoning? Well, deductive reasoning is you start with kind of like conclusions, things that are to some degree true. Well, no, things that are absolutely true. And in the SHSAT, they have to be absolutely true, even if you know in real life that they're false. As long as they're laid down in the sentence as truth, then you must treat them like truth. Okay? If it says the earth is flat, then for the SHSAT, the earth is flat. Don't try to nope, I'm not going to answer this question because it's not scientifically sound. No, they don't care about science. They care about whether you know what's being said. They care about sentence structure, about meaning, and about following through with the logic. That's why it's called logical reasoning. So if the SHSAT in a sentence says that, I don't know, that the earth is flat or boys are stupid, then indeed the earth is flat and it's full of stupid boys, right? You just have to go with it. You're not allowed to switch it up. Alright? Even if it contradicts what you know to be true, it doesn't matter. This is not about you. It's about the text. And that's always true for the SHSAT. Stick close to what the literature says in reading comprehension and stick extremely close to what's being said in those two premises, and then read carefully the question that follows them when it comes to the logical reasoning, okay? So, I'll give you an example of how deductive reasoning works. This is a very common one, alright? Socrates is a man. That's one premise. The other one, all men are mortal. What can we conclude? Socrates is mortal. Is this correct? Again, same sort of setup. What we have are premises, and then we have this, our conclusion. Our conclusion can either be correct or it can be incorrect. Okay? If we use poor logical reasoning to get to our conclusion, then our conclusion is not sound and it is incorrect. You'll be marked wrong on the SHSAT. You have to make sure you're coming up with the correct one. Now, Socrates is a man. Alright? I don't care if you think maybe he never existed. People say Plato created Socrates, that Socrates actually never existed. That could be the case, and if you've read a ton of history books, and that's what your conclusion is based on evidence, I mean, it doesn't matter. It's whatever the SHSAT says. If the SHSAT says that Socrates is a man, then he is indeed a man for all intents and purposes. Do not try to recreate things. Again, it's not about you. Alright? If you say that Socrates is a god, maybe it was Zeus himself who had come down in the flesh of a man, it doesn't matter. Alright? For us, Socrates is indeed a man, and indeed all men are mortal. I don't want to hear about, oh no, but technically you don't die, there's an afterlife. No, don't consider that. Maybe men are not immortal, maybe they were never alive to begin with. Those are crazy arguments, don't bring them in. What you have to do is assume these two to be true. And if those two are true, what must follow from them? What must follow from them? It is indeed that Socrates is mortal, because Socrates is both a man, and we know that men are mortal. So, Socrates, because he's a man, must be mortal himself. And this is called deductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning is sometimes called reasoning from, what? Top down. Not bottom up, top down reasoning. Because you start with truths already. Again, when you're given problems like these, you have to assume that the premises are true if that's what they state. That is to say, you have to read the sentence carefully and assume the sentence is true. Okay? That's what you have to do. So let's go over some that are from the book, I think. Let's see. Do we have any? Yes. I like this one. It's an example, I think, let's see, let's take a look closely together, of deductive reasoning. This comes from an actual book. I took it out myself. It says, most of the people going on a trip to Italy speak Italian. However, some of them are not very fluent. What should you do? This is an actual test question from an actual SHSAT book, alright? I didn't make this one up. So let's apply what we have learned so far. We have to think about this correctly, critically. We have almost always, two sentences. Sometimes you'll have three. But the classic setup is two sentences, alright? And then what do you do with those two sentences? You come to a third sentence called a conclusion. Here what we have with this first sentence is called the premise, and here what we have with the second sentence is another premise. These two premises are enough for us to conclude. Alright? The conclusions are there. Some of them are wrong, and one of them is right. Those are your multiple choice options. You have to choose the right one. Alright? So let's see. before you even look at them, since we're not taking the test now, let's think about this, because the better you're able to think about this clearly, then the better you'll do on the actual test. All right, it says most of the people going on a trip to Italy speak Italian. So the most important thing here is, look, most. What's involved? A restrictive word. And then we have however. Why are we transitioning? It means, hey, I'm going in slightly the other direction. It's saying that even though most of the people going on the trip speak Italian, some of them are not very fluent. So some, another important word. Most and some. Wow, what does that mean? What I would advise you to do is to write these things other ways. So if, for example, that first sentence, most of the people going on a trip to Italy speak Italian. What would be like the opposite of that? The opposite of that would be some people going on the trip don't speak Italian. You see that? Can this and that first sentence be true at the same time? Yes. It can be true at the same time that most of the people going on a trip to Italy speak Italian, and that some people going on the trip don't speak Italian. Those can work together. Those are not mutually exclusive. One of them doesn't cancel the other out. They're both true at the same time. And then it says, however, some of them are not very fluent. So let's make another sentence out of that one. What does it mean when it says that some of them are not very fluent? It means, does it mean that, alright, does it mean some of them? Alright, so we have no Italian. Some people going don't speak Italian. And it says, most of the people on the trip speak Italian. However, some of them are not very fluent. Does it say some are fluent? Very fluent? No. It never tells us some of them are very fluent. It just tells us some of them are not very fluent. It never says anything about anyone being very fluent. It says some of them are not very fluent. Okay? So is anyone very fluent? Does anything in there, remember, you're not allowed to take information from your own head. Does anything in there say that some are very fluent? No. It says that some are not very fluent. Nothing in there says that anyone going on a trip is very fluent. So what do we know? That some people going on the trip don't speak Italian. That most of the people going on the trip do speak Italian. But that some of them are not very fluent. Alright, so there's people who speak no Italian. A little more, a little more, a little more. How much more? We don't know. We can't say for a fact if someone asks us, say we're about to board the bus, we're going on our trip to Italy, and someone says, does anyone on that bus speak perfect Italian? Can we say based on this information that someone does? No, because never here does it indicate explicitly that someone speaks perfect Italian. It only says that most of the people going on the trip speak Italian. Alright, and to complement that sentence, we wrote this because this is also true at the same time. If that's true, this must also be true. If most of the people going on the trip to Italy speak Italian, it's also true that some people going on the trip don't speak Italian. And then that second sentence there, that second one, it's part of it's also a premise. It says some of them are not very fluent. So that means some of them speak like medium levels, from a 1 through 10, like a 3 or a 4 or a 5. It never confirms that someone speaks Italian at level 10. It never does. Okay, so let's look at the options for multiple choice. Which one would you say is it? That's not it. Great. Give me a second. That's it. I'm sorry, guys. Alright, so there it is. It says, based only on the information above, which of the following must be true? Nice. Must. Alright? They're looking for a must. Must be true. Don't tell me what possibly can be true. Some of those answers in there for the multiple choice are possibly true. They're not looking for what might be true sometimes it might not be true. They're looking for what must be true. Alright? So, all the people who are going on the trip to Italy speak some Italian. Let's look at option F and consider it. All the people who are going on the trip to Italy speak some Italian. Now, luckily, I gave you good advice. I said, well, fortunately rather than luckily, most of the people going on the trip to Italy speak Italian. And then I told you to write a sentence that complements it. And what do we write? That if most of the people going on the trip speak Italian, that must mean, necessarily, that some of them don't. So, that first one said, all the people who are going on the trip to Italy speak some Italian. We can safely cross that one out. Can we? Let's see. All the people who are going on the trip to Italy speak some Italian. No, because some people going on the trip don't speak Italian. Only most do. Some don't. So, look. You cross out F. Let's see what G says. Some people going on the trip to Italy speak Italian like a native speaker. Wow. Do we know that as a fact? Does anything in here, maybe something's in there kind of suggest it, or seem to imply it, but does anything in there explicitly say that some people going on the trip to Italy speak like a native speaker? No, we know there are some people who speak no Italian, and then some people who speak some Italian, more and more and more and more, but it never confirms that anyone there speaks like a native speaker. So we can cross that one out, because it has no support in the text. It must have support. Okay? Something in there must bear it out explicitly. Okay? So we crossed it out. Then it says, being fluent in Italian is necessary to going on the trip to Italy. That can't be it either, because it says most of the people going on the trip to Italy speak Italian. And then to complement this, we wrote this, which is another sentence that's also true at the same time, that some people going on the trip don't speak Italian. H says that being fluent in Italian is necessary to go to Italy on the trip. Nope. We know that's not true, because thankfully we wrote this down. So look, we crossed out another option. Two more left. Most people going on the trip to Italy are not very fluent in Italian. Most of the people going on the trip are not very fluent in Italian. Does anything there support that statement? It says most. Most matches most. So let's underline it. Perhaps this will be what we need. But here it says, most of the people going on the trip to Italy speak Italian. It never tells us that most of them speak fluent Italian. If it said most of the people going on the trip to Italy speak fluent Italian, then we could say that's definitely the right answer. But it doesn't say that. It only says that most of the people going on the trip speak Italian. For all we know, they just barely speak it. So it can't be a requirement, because that doesn't say so, right? So look, we crossed out that one, and it leaves us with the answer that people who do not speak Italian well can go on a trip to Italy. Of course that's true, because some of the people going on the trip don't even speak Italian at all. So we got our answer. Our answer is K. Pause the video so you can look at the answers at the same time, alright? It's K. K is the answer, because people who do not speak Italian well can go on a trip to Italy. In fact, they can, because some of the people going on the trip don't even speak Italian at all. Alright, so we broke down this question. We made a little chart like this. This was confirmed. Some people speak no Italian. There are different levels of Italian. All this is confirmed that there are different levels of Italian. Alright? Most of the people go on a trip speak Italian. That must mean they speak at some level. They never tell you what level. But the only thing they do is they never actually tell you that someone's fluent. Alright? They could have said it some way else. They could have said, does anyone speak it just as well as they speak English? Well, we don't know. We don't know how well they speak English. Plus, it's just not explicitly there. It has to explicitly be there. And when we say explicitly, we don't mean suggested, sort of. We mean it has to actually be in there. Now, you might say, how did I make this sentence then? That's not fair. You just said I can't make things up. It's because this sentence has to accompany this sentence. Okay? If I flip a coin and I say, I didn't land on heads, and I make that the first sentence in the premise, I did not land on heads, it must necessarily follow that I landed on tails, because that's the complement. That's the only other thing that can be true. And so remember to write complements. We'll do this over and over because I have several more questions, alright? And here's how you will learn. For every premise, you will write a complement. This, complement that, and then we did a little chart, see? And then you go over the choices, and you consider them. And if any of them contradict either your chart, or your complements, or the actual sentence as it is written, both sentences explicitly, then they're no good. And you keep going down your multiple choices until you reach one of the multiple choices that does not contradict either what's said in the question, a necessary complement that you created, or a little chart that you created as well, okay? But especially the necessary complements. We're going to do a lot more necessary complements, alright? These things must be true. I did not make this up. This is true because that's true. And that's what we're trying to do, alright? And you're going to do that over and over. We'll move on to another question now in a moment, okay? So we're still on deductive reasoning. Maybe there'll be 2 more videos in this series. Stay tuned. The next one will be up in like an hour, alright? So, see you then.